What happens when a soulful singer sits across from one of television's most outspoken hosts, and a simple conversation takes an unexpected turn? What began as a routine promotional appearance for Teddy Swims on The View quickly spiraled into one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history. The tension in the studio was thick enough to cut with a knife, and by the end of it all, Teddy was walking off the set, leaving the hosts speechless and the audience in stunned silence. Under the blazing studio lights, Teddy Swims, whose real name is Joden Dimsdale, settled into his seat with his usual calm confidence. His latest album was climbing the charts, and this was supposed to be a straightforward interview about his music and success. Joy Behar, however, known for her sharp wit and even sharper tongue, had other ideas. Leaning forward with a smirk, she began, "Your music has this raw emotional quality to it. Tell me, is that authenticity something you have to work at? Or does it just come naturally when you're performing?" Teddy smiled politely, his tattooed hands resting on his knees. "Well, Joy," he replied evenly, "I think authenticity isn't something you can fake. Either you're real with people or you're not. My music comes from personal experiences, struggles I've been through, things that have shaped who I am." "Personal experiences," Joy repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You know, I was reading about your background. It's quite the journey from small-town Georgia to the big stage. But let me ask you this. In today's music industry, don't you think artists sometimes manufacture these stories of struggle to seem more relatable?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Teddy's smile faded slightly as his expression hardened. "Are you suggesting that my experiences aren't genuine?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. "Oh, I'm not suggesting anything about you specifically," Joy said with a wave of her hand. "I'm just saying that sometimes the industry loves a good rags to riches story. These things can get, shall we say, enhanced for marketing purposes." Teddy's jaw tightened. "Enhanced?" he repeated slowly. "Joy, with all due respect, I don't think you understand what you're implying." Whoopi Goldberg, sensing the tension rising, tried to step in with a light-hearted comment about the music business. But Joy wasn't done. "And look, Teddy, I'm not attacking you personally," she continued, though her tone suggested otherwise. "But you have to admit there's a formula to these success stories. The struggles, the breakthrough, the emotional connection, it's like a template." Teddy leaned forward, his voice growing more intense. "A template? Are you seriously saying that the years I spent working construction, playing dive bars for 20 people, dealing with rejection after rejection, that all of that was just following some kind of template?" "I'm just saying," Joy began, but Teddy cut her off, something he rarely did in interviews. "No, let me finish," he said sharply. "You're talking about things you clearly don't understand. You want to talk about templates? Let's talk about the template of successful talk show hosts who think they can minimize other people's real experiences because they've never had to worry about where their next meal was coming from." The audience fell completely silent, the atmosphere electric with discomfort. Joy's face flushed, but she refused to back down. "Excuse me, I think I've had my share of struggles. Thank you very much. I didn't just fall into this career." Teddy took a deep breath, his southern accent becoming more pronounced as he replied, "I'm sure you've had challenges, Joy. But there's a big difference between challenges and survival. Maybe think about that before you question someone else's authenticity." The room stayed silent, the camera still rolling as Teddy stood up, removed his mic, and walked off the set, leaving a stunned panel and an audience that would be talking about the moment for weeks to come. "But sitting here questioning whether my story is real, whether my music comes from an authentic place, that's not just insulting to me," Teddy said, his voice shaking slightly with restrained emotion. "It's insulting to everyone who's ever had to fight for something." The studio fell silent. Sarah Haynes quickly attempted to redirect the conversation by asking about Teddy's upcoming tour dates. But the damage had already been done. The tension between Joy and Teddy was palpable, and neither of them seemed willing to let it go. Joy crossed her arms and leaned forward, her tone sharp. "You know what, Teddy? Maybe you're being a little too sensitive here. This is television. We ask tough questions. If you can't handle that, maybe you're not ready for this level of success." The words landed like a slap. Teddy's eyes narrowed, and for a moment it looked like he might explode. Instead, he took a deep breath, his hands gripping the arms of his chair tightly. "Too sensitive?" he said quietly, but his low, steady voice carried across the entire studio. "Lady, you just spent the last 5 minutes questioning my integrity, my authenticity, and my entire life story. And now you're telling me I'm too sensitive for calling you out on it? Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Teddy wasn't done. The floodgates had opened. You want to know what's not authentic, Joy? He said, his voice rising with each word. Sitting behind that desk, making six figures to tear down people who've actually lived through something real. You want to talk about templates? How about the template of privileged media personalities who think they can psychoanalyze someone's entire life in a 5-minute segment? Joy's mouth dropped open, clearly not expecting this level of pushback from what she had assumed would be another polite celebrity guest. Now wait just a minute, she began. No, you wait, Teddy shot back, standing up suddenly. The unexpected movement caught everyone off guard, and the camera operators scrambled to adjust their shots. I came here to talk about my music, to share something I'm passionate about with your audience. Instead, you decided to turn this into some kind of gotcha moment. Whoopi Goldberg stepped in, her voice calm but urgent. Okay, let's everybody just take a breath here, she said. But Joy wasn't backing down. Her tone turned cutting as she leaned forward again. Teddy, you're acting like a child right now. This is what interviews are. We ask questions. We dig deeper. If you can't handle that, then maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Teddy stared at her, disbelief flashing across his face. A child? He repeated, his voice cracking with incredulity. You know what's childish, Joy? Sitting there with your smug little smirk, acting like you've got me all figured out when you don't know the first thing about my life. The other hosts were visibly uncomfortable. Now Sunny Hostin fidgeted with her notes while Alyssa Farah Griffin looked like she wanted to sink into her chair. The audience sat frozen, completely captivated by the train wreck unfolding before them. I know enough, Joy shot back, her voice dripping with condescension. I know that every singer who comes on this show has the same story. Tough childhood, big dreams, breakthrough moment. It's like you all went to the same media training school. That was the final straw. Teddy stepped closer to the desk, his hands clenched at his sides. Media training school? Are you out of your mind? You think sleeping in my car between gigs was media training? You think working double shifts just to afford studio time was some kind of act? I think... Joy began, but Teddy cut her off with a sharp gesture that silenced the entire room. No, let me tell you what I think, he said, his voice suddenly calm in a way that was more intimidating than shouting. I think you're so disconnected from reality that you can't recognize authenticity when it's sitting right in front of you. I think you've been living in this bubble for so long that you've forgotten what it's like to actually struggle for something. Joy's face turned red with anger.
How dare you make assumptions about my life?
She snapped. How dare? Teddy laughed, a short, humorless sound. That's rich, he said coldly. Coming from someone who spent the last 10 minutes making assumptions about mine. The studio was dead silent. The hosts avoided eye contact, the cameras kept rolling, and Teddy stood there, eyes blazing, before removing his mic, setting it on the desk, and walking off the stage without another word. The difference, Teddy said, his voice low but cutting through the air like a blade, is that my assumptions are based on you sitting there acting like you're better than me, while yours are based on what? Some article you skimmed before the show? The tension in the studio was suffocating. Even the crew members who had witnessed countless heated moments on The View looked stunned by the intensity unfolding before them. Sarah Haynes tried once again to rescue the situation. Maybe we can talk about the positive response to your latest single. She offered, her tone careful and composed. Teddy turned toward her, his anger tempered by respect. You know what, Sarah? He said. I appreciate you trying to keep this professional, but I think we're past that point now. He then turned back to Joy, who was glaring at him with open hostility. Here's what's going to happen, Teddy continued, his voice calm but his eyes blazing with conviction. I'm going to finish saying what I came here to say, and then I'm going to leave. And you, Joy, are going to sit there and listen without interrupting me for once in your life. Excuse me? Joy sputtered. This is my show. Actually, Teddy replied, gesturing to the other hosts, it's all of theirs too. You just seem to forget that sometimes. Taking a steadying breath, he composed himself before continuing. I grew up in a town where the biggest excitement was the Friday night football game. My dad worked in a factory. My mom cleaned houses. We didn't have money for music lessons or fancy equipment. Everything I learned, I taught myself. Joy opened her mouth, but the look on Teddy's face stopped her cold. When I was 22, I was living paycheck to paycheck, playing covers in bars where half the crowd was too drunk to know what song I was singing. I didn't have connections in the music industry. I didn't have a safety net or a trust fund. What I had was a voice, a dream, and a stubborn refusal to give up. The studio was silent now. Even Joy seemed momentarily subdued by the raw honesty in his voice. So when you sit there with your comfortable salary and your guaranteed platform and question whether my story is real, whether my struggles were genuine, it doesn't just insult me, Teddy said, his voice rising with emotion. It insults every person who's ever had to choose between paying rent and chasing their dreams. Whoopi Goldberg nodded slowly, visibly moved. That's, she began, but Joy couldn't stop herself. Look, Teddy, I understand you're passionate about this, but you're taking it way too personally. I'm just doing my job here. Teddy stared at her for a long moment, disappointment clouding his expression. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but carried a weight that filled the room. Your job is supposed to be having conversations with people, not tearing them down for entertainment. But clearly, we have very different ideas about what that means. He turned to look at the other hosts, then straight into the camera. I want to apologize to the viewers who tuned in expecting to hear about music and instead got to witness this circus. That's not what I came here for. Then he turned back to Joy. I've met a lot of people in this industry, he said firmly. Some genuine, some fake, some just trying to make it through another day. But I've never met someone so determined to diminish others just to make themselves feel important. That's not journalism, Joy, that's just sad. The words hit her like a punch. For once in her career, Joy Behar was speechless. Her mouth opened, then closed again as the other host sat frozen in disbelief. Teddy reached down and unclipped his microphone. The small, deliberate motion seemed louder than any argument. You know what the real difference is between people like me and people like you, Joy? He said, his tone calm but final. When I fail on my own. When you fail, you take a bunch of other people down with you. Now hold on, Joy started, but Teddy shook his head. I'm done holding on, he said, stepping back from his chair. I came here as a guest with respect for this show and what it represents. But I'm not going to sit here and let you turn my life into your personal punching bag because you're having a bad day. Whoopi tried one last time to ease the tension. Teddy, please, let's just... But Teddy raised a hand, his voice softening as he addressed her. Whoopi, I have nothing but respect for you and what you've accomplished, he said sincerely. Same goes for Sarah, Sunny, and Alyssa. He gave them a small nod before turning toward the audience, who sat in stunned silence. Without another word, he placed the mic on the desk, straightened his jacket, and walked off the set, leaving behind a silence so heavy that not even Joy could fill it. Teddy took a deep breath, his composure steady, but his frustration evident as he looked at the hosts. You all seem like decent people, he began, his tone calm yet pointed. People who understand that interviewing someone doesn't mean attacking them. Without even glancing in her direction, he gestured toward Joy. But this right here? This isn't professional. This isn't even entertaining. This is just mean-spirited, and I won't be part of it. Joy's face turned a deep shade of red as her hands gripped the edge of the desk. You can't just walk out of an interview because you don't like the questions, she shot back. Teddy turned to her with a cold, defiant calm. Watch me, he said simply. Those two words would later become the most replayed moment of the entire segment. He began walking toward the edge of the set, but Joy wasn't finished. This is exactly what I'm talking about, she called after him, her voice rising. You can't handle a little pushback, so you throw a tantrum and storm off. That's not very authentic, is it? Teddy stopped dead in his tracks. For a moment, it seemed like he might turn around and continue the argument. Instead, without facing her, he said quietly, You know what's authentic, Joy? Knowing when someone isn't worth your time. He paused, letting the silence and his words hang heavy in the air. I hope whatever satisfaction you get from this was worth it, because you just showed everyone watching exactly who you really are. The studio audience began murmuring among themselves, some clearly siding with Teddy, others stunned by what they had just witnessed. Refusing to let him have the last word, Joy stood from her chair, her voice trembling with anger. Oh, so now I'm the villain because I asked you some tough questions? This is what's wrong with your generation. You all think everyone should just tell you how wonderful you are. That was the breaking point. Teddy turned around sharply, his eyes blazing. My generation? He repeated incredulously. Lady, my generation is out there working 3 jobs just to afford rent, dealing with a world that's falling apart, trying to find some meaning in the chaos. We don't need people to tell us we're wonderful. We need people to stop tearing us down for sport. Joy tried to speak, but Teddy lifted his hand, stopping her. "I'm done," he said firmly. But this time his tone wasn't angry, it was exhausted. "I'm done with this conversation. I'm done with your attitude, and I'm done pretending that what just happened here was anything close to professional journalism." He turned toward the camera, addressing the viewers directly. "For anyone watching who's ever been told their dreams aren't real, their struggles don't matter, or their story isn't worth telling, don't let anyone make you feel small. Your experiences are valid, your voice matters, and you don't owe anyone an explanation for who you are or where you came from." With that, Teddy walked off the set, leaving behind a stunned panel and an audience unsure how to react. Joy, clearly flustered, tried to recover. "Well, that was certainly unexpected," she said awkwardly. "I guess some people just can't handle." But Whoopi interrupted firmly. "Maybe we should just go to commercial." The damage, however, was already done. In less than 15 minutes, a routine celebrity interview had spiraled into one of the most talked about moments on live television. As the show cut to commercial, the camera lingered for a brief second on the empty chair where Teddy had been sitting, the silence of the studio hanging heavy in the air. The confrontation between Teddy Swims and Joy Behar had become more than just an on-air argument. It was a defining moment, a clash between old-school media and modern authenticity. It was a reminder that behind every success story is a real person with real struggles, and that sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is simply walking away.